Hello, my name is Marcus Reyes, and today I'm going to be talking about Meshtastic. And Meshtastic uses long-range radio waves and it Bluetooth to your phone, goes through the Meshtastic app. So, kind of display that. So these are current nodes in my area. There's quite a few. I have a pretty good infrastructure here in Central Oregon, and the ability to send messages with Meshtastic is just text through non-existing infrastructure, which is just through these. This is the Meshtastic node. This one is a handheld device, and this back here is a solar node. That is one you can just smack a piece of rebar on the ground, put your PVC pipe over it, and have it in the middle of the woods and be able to reach home. That's the idea. The actual capabilities of it I haven't tested yet, but that will definitely be put in a video that I'll release later when I go camping sometime. I will be doing lots of tests out there, and so some of this information might change more in terms of the range and the speed at which these messages can send. From my tests, it's basically the same as texting. All depends on hops, how many hops you need to make, which is basically when you send a message and you can't get the message directly to the device you're trying to send a message to. If there are any nodes in between you and the device that you're trying to send a message to, your message will go from your device, and then it'll you basically skip a beat and use the radio waves or use the device that it will bounce off of to extend the range of your message. The default setting, I believe, is 7 hops. And I've been able to get a message over 241 miles with 3 hops. That was to the southwest of Idaho. And I've also been able to get a message to Portland over the mountains on 2 hops. And so that was from my house to Black Butte to Portland. That was just the southeast of Portland, which I'll put a mile, how far that was on screen right here. But so this is a handheld device, which I've already talked about, but this only has an 1100 milliamp battery, and on a full charge, displaying both the GPS and looking for nodes, being on constant refresh, I've been able to get it to run for 10 hours. Not bad. If you have, if you're out from your campsite, if using an example, if you're out hiking or you're hunting and you're away from camp, you have a solar node set up at camp. And then you have your device, which you only turn on when you leave camp, because when you're at camp, you'll be able to receive messages through this device and not your handheld. But when you're out away from camp, you just turn on your device, you go out on your hike or your hunt, and then it should last 10 hours. And that's when it's on. It doesn't have to be on the whole time. Ideally, it probably would be in case of emergency and ease of access. So when you turn it on, you can send a message home, and it would go from your device, in theory, your device to your camp, and then hop, because you'd have a bigger antenna or stronger antenna on your solar node. This is a 2.5 gain antenna that I got off Rockland. Is a pack of 2 for, I believe, well, I'm not going to guess the price. I'll just display it here and where I got it from. And then this is a 4 dBi antenna. And then the big one on the top, kind of hard. Oh, no, you can see it. It's a 5.8 dBi antenna, which I found in at least my research that is a good strength to be putting on your house if you're trying to reach people around you, and also somewhat far. The actual range on that depends a lot on line of sight and what kind of obstructions are in the way. When you go to a higher gain antenna, like a 8 or a 10 gain antenna, that's when it gets a little more confusing, because if there's any debris or obstructions, I guess I should say, in between your antenna and where you're trying to get a message, then the signal would just die off. With the 5.8, I've heard that it's a little bit more flexible. It can get over smaller obstructions, smaller hills that are nearby, or trees. But with a 10 or an 8 gain antenna, if the pole is on say the peak of your house and you have it going up the center, if the wind blows it and it goes at an angle, so your antenna's like this and then it shoots to the side, then your signal will go straight to the ground and up into space, basically. And so your range will just kind of be shot. You won't be able to get messages because you'd have to go back and up onto your roof and set your antenna level. And so with that, there's a little bit of trial, not really trial and error, but more so upkeep. You have to make sure your antenna is positioned good, and you don't want to have any obstructions between you and where you're trying to send a message to, unless there is, say, a hill. That's, your house is down here, then you have a hill up here. You want to have an antenna on the top, so when you're trying to send a message, it can get around the hill, and because it won't be able to go through, because any obstructions with those ones, it's more of a flat signal range, or a flat signal plane. And so if it's just flat, like just level straight across, like I was saying before, when it tilts, it will just shoot basically into the ground and up into space. So when you have the antenna being flat like that, any obstructions will just kill the signal. But with the 5.8, I guess it's, like I said, is a little bit more flexible. It can get over smaller obstructions and smaller hills, which is good for home use. So having a homemade, or homemade network. So if you're in the woods, probably be a better idea to get not the strongest antenna you can buy, because that's not always going to be a good thing. This one would be used on more of a larger handheld that might have a touch screen or bigger battery on it, stronger GPS, etc. And so this isn't one that I'd be putting on one of these little guys. I think the 2.5 gain from my testing and kind of just carrying around with me is a pretty good size. The antenna is a little bit more flexible, so if you're putting it in your pocket, you can kind of basically stick this up in your shirt, or I have it in my jacket pocket, the little chest pocket or breast pocket. That is pretty comfortable to carry around. I don't really notice it. It does get a little hot sometimes, I notice, just this little screen here. If it's constantly transmitting signal and you have the GPS going, the battery dies, like I said, within 10 hours of with my testing being on, and you can actually shut the screen off. So that, 10 hours being on with the screen off, and that's pretty good for a 1100 milliamp hour battery. I have a 4000 that I'm planning on making a larger device with, but that would also include probably a touch screen on it, or a different, maybe a keyboard, because if I have that surface area, might as well use it. And when it comes to different devices like the solar nodes or these handhelds, there's also different ones like repeaters. So with a smaller device, you want to have this set to be a client, because a client won't try to repeat the signal, and so it won't take priority over a router or a repeater, two different words that are used to describe that. And so with this one, you would probably, like if you're in a suburban area, you might want to set this one to a client as well. But if you have one, say, on a mountain, that one would be a repeater, because you'd want messages to prioritize the repeater over any of the clients in the area, because it would have a stronger signal, you'd take less hops, and it would just overall be a cleaner process on your message sending. If you try and send a message and it doesn't reach the device you're trying to send a message to, it'll try it 3 times before it stops trying to send it. And in terms of the history of messages, the messages might do a little bit more research on this, but it was, I think, 3 days, and then the message is deleted, which saves on space, on storage. And in terms of history, like when you have the device off, if the device is not on, it will not receive messages. Now, a test I really want to try is if I have a home node and this in a group, what's it called, a private channel. If I have these two in a private channel and this one's off and I send a message to that one, I don't believe this one would get the message. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So if you're out doing camping or hunting, maybe have a set time that you tell people, maybe at home or your other campmates that you're out there with, that you're going to turn it on at 9 o'clock, right? 9, and so you get up at 5, then you maybe go do an initial hike, a scout at 9, and then you turn on the device, and then that's when you guys can send messages, maybe coordinate, and that'll just be a little bit more organized and make the battery life last a lot longer. Because in that case, you wouldn't have, you turn it on maybe 30, 45 minutes at a time, and you get a lot more battery out of it. In that case, you'd get, less, roughly 10 days out of your battery if you're only going to do it 30 minutes at a time. But of course, you'd maybe want to turn it on at, say, 9 and then 5 p.m., 9 a.m., 5 p.m. And then that in that case, you can, like I said, coordinate a little bit easier. You wouldn't have to, hope that you're turning on your device the same time as another person to be able to receive messages. And also, folks at home, if maybe, they notice you don't turn it on, that's a good indicator that something might be wrong. And so there's a lot of use cases in this, while you're using the device, or even if you're not, for emergencies. And from what I understand, these devices were used to coordinate first responders during the California fires that happened. Sorry, I misspoke. I meant Hurricane Helene. They were given to volunteers. Over 120 radios were handed out to help give first responders information on where people needed help, and it just helped organize the search and rescue. Know about this, the stronger the network gets, and say if something goes down and our servers or cell towers fall, these will be unaffected. These do not use any existing infrastructure. When you get into a different software, or I guess you could say device network, it would be, so this one I'm thinking of is Reticulum. That's when you get into using existing infrastructure, but also these as well. And that's something I'm not super knowledgeable on, but is really interesting to me. And that's something I'll definitely be picking up sometime soon. And that will be another thing I'll kind of be talking about and going through my experience with it. This is a case and a build that I put together myself. So I 3D modeled, 3D printed the whole case. It's 3 layers, and then this side piece kind of sandwiches it together. I have heat inserts for all these screws, so it's pretty durable. And then I soldered on an on-off switch. So you turn it on, and then you have to hold the power button. Oh, wrong one. This one. Give it a sec. Make sure it's on. Yep. Okay. Yep. So there. And then loads on the software on the little screen. You can just, let me see if I can get that to focus. Okay. Yep. So that's the first screen. Then you can cycle through the other channels. It's kind of hard to see, but there's messages, last heard, so the last nodes that you've heard, bearings. So these are ones I believe with GPS. If I'm wrong, then post it, oh, whoops, over here. And then there's also your position. So if your device is off and you turn it on, it'll take a few minutes for your GPS to get a lock on you because it needs to reach satellites, and it'll tell you your longitude and latitude. And also it'll tell you your altitude as well. And then it'll tell you there's a LoRa channel, which will tell you your device setup. It'll say, so I have mine set to a client. Mine is the US with a long fast channel, which is set to default. And the different channels that you can have are, let's see, it's short. Well, why not? Don't hurt my brain. I'm just going to put it here. These are all the different channels that they could be on. And then it says my frequency, which is set at 908.875 megahertz. That's the frequency that this is operating on right now. And then it'll say the channel util, which is the channel utilization. So that tells me how many devices are currently using the frequency that I'm using. And that will let you know about frequency, or I guess it would be radio traffic. And then there's also system, which will say the heap, the PS RAM, and the flash. So that is all information I actually haven't fully delved into yet, so I'm not going to know a whole lot on that. And then there's also a clock. So it says the date, and there's a clock, hour, minute, and then second is going to be on the bottom right. And then there's a favorite. So there's a favorite channel that will, if you find a node that is maybe one that you previously set up, or someone else that has a node, you can favorite it and you can find their position, and it'll tell you if they're online, their battery life, stuff like that, which all Bluetooths to your phone. And let's see if I can pull it up. So you need to have Bluetooth on. It goes through Bluetooth. You do not need Wi-Fi. And then I have, let's see, 3 nodes. You can see them there. It won't, won't focus, but this one up here is the one I'm connected to. And then there's also a node map. So let's see if it'll load. Probably right, or I mean focus. Yeah, kind of. Okay. And right now there's over 50 nodes in my area. In all time, there's been 126 that have appeared and then disappeared. So that's not ones that are online. Currently, this thing will take a little bit to yeah, and it also says what on some of these. Yeah, okay. So it'll say on the bottom, let's see, it would be bottom left of the screen or of the each one, it'll say what device it actually is. Some say Heltec V4, some will say Heltec WSL, so I think that's a WizBlock V3, solar nodes, private home network, Heltec wireless tracker. So there's different devices that can be flashed with the software and then turned into a node. Some are better for being a repeater. Some you just use for sensors. You could have thermostats, humidity sensors, pH sensors. From what I understand, the use case on a lot of these with farmers is being able to check the moisture level and pH of the soil on farmland. So it's, saves a lot of time when going out and having to do it yourself. You can just have a mesh network set up on your ranch and then have all of your sensors go to a solar node that would be on your house, that would be your home node, and then you can receive all the information wirelessly. And you wouldn't have to go out and spend a whole day or two testing the levels of the soil. And so in that use case, what's to argue with that? I mean, that's a crazy thing that I'm surprised I never even heard of before until now. And when it comes to solar nodes, that's when I'm getting more into the other aspects of it, where you need to solder on different switches to convert the 12 volt coming out of the solar node into something that's not going to fry the board like I did a couple days ago, which is fun. $36, but it won't make that mistake again. So I got 2 just in case. But when you get a new one in the mail, it'll come and say, like for the Heltecs, I only have Heltecs right now, and actually that's a Liligo WizBlock. But so it'll come in a little box like this. You can open it, and then this is the main board. Then you have these parts here, which can be used to attach it into, say, a breadboard or like a Arduino or a Raspberry Pi motherboard circuit board. You get a little antenna. Then you get this pigtail connector. And then you get 2 extra battery connectors, which can be soldered onto any battery. From what I understand, I use the lithium rechargeables, 3.7 volt, and so this one is, I think I said, an 1100 milliamp hour battery, and that one I have a 10. Whoa, breaking stuff. I have a 10,000 milliamp hour battery, and then I also have a 4,000 that I was going to use to make a little bit bigger and longer battery life handheld. But when it comes to like one with a 10,000 milliamp hour battery, that one can last anywhere from a week to say a month. But with the solar node, it can actually outpace the charge on the node, and so it can hold basically forever, as long as it can even go a week with a cloudy day. And even with doing a GPS, having a GPS on it as well, it won't really affect the battery life that much. Not to the point to where it'll run out of battery within a day or two. It'll be able to run pretty much indefinitely. The only thing you need to do is maybe if the antenna gets knocked a little lopsided, just fix that. But other than that, is as long as you have a waterproof case on it, it'll be fine. Now, when it comes to stuff like snow and ice, I haven't had any experience with that yet. So if that's something that I find to be an issue and maybe need to, before winter, put up a little bit of a heating coil around it or something. I'm not sure if that would affect frequency or not, or the signal, but that's something maybe I'll test when it comes around. It's spring for me right now, so I'm not going to be able to test that for a while, but hopefully by the time winter comes around, I'll have a better idea of range and what will and won't affect the frequency or my signal on my antennas. But yeah, so this is pretty interesting to me. I mean, I don't know if you can, well, yeah, you can. So I have a 3D printer there, and I have one on my desk. And so I was able to 3D model and 3D print this case. I had inspiration from somebody who made a modular Heltec V3, or no, it was a Heltec V4. I'll put it on screen over here from Maker World, Bamboo Lab. They made a modular one that uses contactless, or was it called? It's a wireless, not wireless, basically contact pins that are, say, on, let's see, on the iPad here. So like using those to be able to have basically a hot swappable keyboard and switches, dials, knobs, stuff like that. And that is, kind of where the creativity and the personalization of these devices comes in. And that's where I'm going to get super interested in being able to create my own handheld device, and maybe even something like a CyberDeck, where you could have a CyberDeck router where you can have a centralized, or where you can centralize your network to be able to get all of your sensors and messages and all those kinds of basically combining all the devices to have one information deck, basically. I mean, it's a CyberDeck, but where you'd store most of your information on all of your nodes and all the ones in the area. And so yeah, with the more people know about this, and that will make the network that much stronger, having more nodes, because you have 100 nodes in the area and 10 go down, it's not going to really affect the signal or the range, as long as you have say bigger repeaters on hills or mountains in your area, or just stronger antennas on houses and, like I said, hills. But when it comes to the antennas, that's where the different power, the gain, that's where that comes into play. And I'm not so sure exactly what would be the best. From my understanding, of 5.8 would be perfect to put on a house, and then a 10 or an 8 gain antenna would be better to put on, say, a hill. It's not going to reach the nodes directly around it. It'll go basically straight over them, because the signal is more linear, and it's not as, say, flexible or wavy, from what I understand, of a 5.8 gain antenna. And so being able to get the range farther but maybe miss the ones around it is something you might want to take into consideration when say building a router node to put on a hill in your area. And that might be something you can get in contact with the forestry service. Would be useful for, say, first responders or hikers, being able to alert anybody for an emergency. And so yeah, when it comes to the customizability of these things, I haven't quite explored that yet, but I know I'm going to have a blast doing it. And when it comes to the community, that's probably the biggest part when it comes to getting out of state. If you're trying to, I've been able to get a message 241 miles on the southwest of Idaho on 3 hops. And I've been able to get over the mountains here in Oregon to Portland on 2. And that was all thanks to a node that was on Black Butte and a node that was on Powell Butte. And so that's in my area. And well, maybe I'll just bleep those out. I don't know about doxing. I'm not trying to get myself snuffed out for my nodes. But yeah, so you can actually make a case out of this too, and maybe that'll be a short that I'll put on my YouTube, which will be Remy. That's just it's just Remy, REMMI. Might change, I'm not sure. I'd have to check again. It's been a while since I posted a video on there. This has opened a whole new idea brewing, basically, of getting into practical electronics. I haven't done much with them. I mean, I know of them, and I've done a little bit of coding. Took a small little Lego robotics class when I was, I think it was 9, maybe 10. And that's basically all the experience I have with electronics. But being able to solder on GPSs onto, say, a Heltec V3 that doesn't come with a GPS module on it, it's just been a lot of fun. And adding on and off switches and being able to put together a solar node is just, I don't see why you wouldn't get into it. It's fairly inexpensive. With something like this, I will put a parts list of everything that I bought and how much it was. And some of it you wouldn't exactly need to spend that much. I got, say 100 of these little 20mm screws to get all the way through. I have some of these ones that I used for the other parts, but you wouldn't need to buy, say 100 or 200 at a time if you're just going to make, one or two. That's something you can get up at the store for fairly inexpensive. I mean, it would be cheaper in the long run to buy bulk, but you don't necessarily need to. And so, yeah, I mean, this being able to have these off-grid communication systems for when you're camping or hunting, or if cell towers go down, for instance, this is a kind of a doomsday protocol. Being able to, there's the acronym that I'll put on the side. I forget it, but this is part of it. Being able to respond and have communications in a situation where majority of infrastructure falls. And being able to have all these sensors on it is good for agriculture purposes. If you're setting up, say, a compound, for instance, if you have a compound set up, being able to monitor the pH and the moisture levels in your plots will just make life that much smoother. And so when it comes to all of this stuff, it's cheap. Why not just give it a shot? Maybe make two handheld ones and just give them to a buddy, and you can be able to have communication over with antenna like this. That's when you start getting into, I believe, like 10 miles. When you have line of sight and it's just good conditions. And when it comes to range, that's where it's a little bit more like you look up what's the range on a 2.5 dBi antenna. It'll say, well, it depends on, it doesn't give a straight answer because it does really depend. If there's line of sight, any obstructions between you or where you're trying to send a message to, that could be a hill, that could be trees, it could be a building. That'll all affect the range. And knowing that is done more so through tests. There's probably people on Reddit. Reddit is the place for hobbyists and people who are doing community open source projects like this. And that's where you might find more specific answers. From my testing, the antenna that comes in here, from what I understand, can get in up to a mile in a suburban area, and then 5 to 10 if you have like line of sight. That's like, yeah, line of sight, perfect conditions, no obstructions. So that's something that you'd have to test for yourself in your use case. If you're in the forest, you probably wouldn't want to get a stronger antenna on, say, a solar node, because any trees or hills in the way would just completely kill the signal. And maybe a 5.8 or maybe just a 4 dBi gain monitor or 4 gain antenna might be the best for your use case. Anyways, yeah, that's all I had for this video. More so just a brief description, and I'm fairly new to it, so I'm not going to know everything. Even just radios in general, this is all new, so this just been a lot of fun experimenting with it and seeing what the community's been able to do with it, especially when you have stuff like a 3D printer. That's when you can customize it and make it more yours and innovate a little bit on people's designs and their builds. And yeah, so thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, I'll try my best to answer them, but I'm not going to know everything. Or if you have any tips for me on how to maybe strengthen my signal, or how to get longer battery life out of stuff, what kind of GPSs you want to get for certain use cases, how big of a GPS, this kind of stuff. This maybe questions I don't even know what I should be asking. If you have any tips for me, I would greatly appreciate it. And thank you. I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because it'll make a huge difference and let me know that this is interesting to people, and I'll be making more. So yes, thank you for watching.